This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, we now bring you a discussion on India-Myanmar bilateral relations. The participants are Uday Bhanu Singh, expert on Myanmar issues, and Manas Pratim Bhuyan, journalist.
The Myanmarese president, Mr. U Win Mint, is in India currently. He's on a 4-day visit to India. Today he held extensive bilateral talks with Prime Minister Narendra Modi on diverse issues covering trade, investment, communication, regional cooperation. So how do you see the overall visit of Myanmar's president to India?
The importance of Myanmar for us is immense because of the strategic location of Myanmar. And this visit by the Myanmar president to India, the aim is to solidify the relationship between India and Myanmar on a number of issues. Particularly, we've had the important agreement on development of Rakhine State. So at the moment, the main emphasis is on development of Rakhine State, to which India is committed, and some of the agreements that were signed based on that.
Definitely we'll come to the agreements in the later part of our discussion. But as you rightly say, the strategic location of Myanmar is very, very important for India's national security. So India actually shares around 1,640 kilometers of border with Myanmar. A number of northeastern states share their borders with Myanmar, including Nagaland and Manipur. Do you think the visit will also enhance cooperation in ensuring proper vigil over the border so that certain militant groups can't operate from Myanmar's territories in certain northeastern states?
Certainly, we have had great understanding between the armed forces of the two countries. And recently, of course, we also had the visit of Chief of Naval Staff from India to Myanmar this month itself. And earlier we had a visit by the CNC of Defence of Myanmar to India, General Lang. And these two visits are indicative of the close understanding on defence matters between the two countries. Now, Myanmar is significant for 2 or 3 reasons. One is that we have the long coastline. We need to have a secure Indian Ocean. We also need security with regard to our northeastern states, where insurgents take refuge across the border. And we have had understanding between the two countries on this issue that Myanmar territory would not be used against India. And joint operations also have taken place in the past. So this visit by the President of Myanmar will be important for ensuring the security of the 4 northeastern states which border Myanmar. Significantly, Myanmar is the only ASEAN state which has a land border with India. And it has also a maritime border with India. So with so much of activity happening in the port regions of Bay of Bengal, it is going to be a very important area for our attention.
As you rightly said, in fact, the maritime security cooperation has been a very important component of our security cooperation with Myanmar. So India has proposed to set up a coastal radar system which will include Myanmar also. So how do you see this project? Will it effectively help India in having a Hawkeye vigil over our waters, particularly at a time when China has been very, very aggressively expanding its military influence in the region? So how do you see the coastal radar project that India has proposed to the Myanmar side for a better maritime security surveillance?
Surveillance of this region is important not only for as regards Indian Ocean is concerned, it's also important for our northeastern states. So the proximity of Andamans to the state of Malacca and the emergence of Chok Fu as a very important port, which is again something which China is keenly developing. These will be important for us in the context also of the fact that India has given a submarine to Myanmar recently, and also the fact that China has been making inroads into this region, helping Thailand with 3 submarines, and we are seeing increasingly a very unstable geostrategic environment in the Indian Ocean. And this has, of course, to be also seen in the context of developments in the South China Sea.
So how do you see overall Chinese influence over Myanmar? When we see various projects, actually road projects, various infrastructure projects in Myanmar, we see in fact a lot of Chinese involvement. They have built Naypyidaw, the new capital city. I mean, China had contributed a lot in developing the new capital of Myanmar.
China began to dominate over Myanmar during the military rule when Myanmar was entirely boycotted by the West. And at that time, the Chinese got a secure foothold in Myanmar. And when Myanmar started opening up in 2010-11, at that time when others started coming in, there was an opposition which surfaced with regard to some projects which China had in Myanmar, particularly the Midstone Dam project. Now, China has already developed dual pipeline starting from Chokfu going on to Yunnan province in China, and it has a lot of other infrastructure projects underway. And all these projects, with the objective of encouraging all these projects, the Chinese president paid a visit to Myanmar very recently. The idea was to ensure that these projects receive the support of the Myanmar government.
Today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Myanmar's President U Win Mint held very extensive talks, following which both the countries signed 10 agreements for expanding cooperation in a range of areas, including transport, communication, power, to check trafficking, and number of areas ensuring welfare in the Rakhine state. So how do you see the overall outcome of Prime Minister's meeting with the Myanmar's president, particularly when the Myanmar's leadership also looking for India's help in developing infrastructure in the country?
You see, the stability of Myanmar is paramount to India, partly because it is the only ASEAN country with which India has a land border, and 4 of our northeastern states are bordering this important state. With some kind of instability caused in the Rakhine state, it is an area of concern for us, particularly because India has undertaken the Kaladan multimodal project, which starts in Mizoram state and ends in Sitwe port. So this gives an access to the Indian Ocean. So the stability of Rakhine state, where Sitwe is located, is of great importance to India. And that is why, with the Rohingya issue creating some disturbance in this neighboring country, we have offered to build many projects in Rakhine state, and the 10 agreements, of which 8 of them are pertaining to this region. 2 are on communication and health, and the others are with regard to trafficking, with regard to social welfare. These are going to be of great significance in ensuring that Rakhine state remains stable and that we are able to have some stability in this important region.
Dr. Singh, you have been keeping track of developments in Myanmar, and we have seen in the last 4-5 years there has been an upswing in our cooperation with Myanmar. So India's ties with Myanmar saw a lot of vibrancy in the last 4 years. There has been cooperation in a range of areas where we did not have similar cooperation in the past. So how do you see the cooperation with Myanmar's government, but the Indian government, after Mr. Modi came to power?
You see, the most significant development that took place in 2014 was proclamation of the Act East policy, and this proclamation by Prime Minister Modi in Naypyidaw was an important development because it showed that we are now upgrading Look East policy to Act East policy, and choosing Naypyidaw as the place where this was declared is significant because we regard Myanmar as a very important neighbor. We also had the Myanmar president last year in New Delhi at the second swearing in of the Prime Minister, which again shows the close bonds. We've had a number of reasons encourage this development.
So overall, sir, when you say cooperation, so what are the areas that we can think of cooperation with Myanmar? The areas where we have not explored the potential for greater bilateral ties?
First of all, defense and security would be primary focus. Maritime cooperation is an integral part of this cooperation, and our Navy-to-Navy cooperation, military exercises with Myanmar, these are important areas, of course, but besides the defense and security cooperation, particularly within ASEAN, we cooperate through ADMM+, we cooperate through ASEAN Regional Forum and the other forums like the East Asia Summit. We need to further this cooperation in people-to-people interaction as well. We have a number of Buddhists coming from Myanmar to India, particularly to Bodh Gaya. The President will also be visiting Bodh Gaya, and we have a very important cultural context. We have those cultural ties with Myanmar which need to be furthered. And religious tourism, air links with the cities of Myanmar, these will also promote closer ties with Myanmar. And also for the common man, it's very important to have proper road links, bus route from Imphal to Mandalay. These are important linkages which will bring the people closer together. We must remember that many of the people on our side of the northeastern states and Myanmar, they are of same ethnic background. We need to also encourage these people-to-people linkages.
So what about the possible cooperation in the energy sector? In fact, there are oil blocks in Myanmar. Myanmar is rich in hydrocarbons. So how do you see, in fact, what kind of cooperation India can have or India can think of in having a deeper energy cooperation with Myanmar, particularly in the oil and gas sector?
India was offered oil blocks in Myanmar, and it was some delay on our part that we were not able to build a pipeline from offshore Arakan earlier when it was offered, and then because we could not take up the offer, it was offered to China. So India has lost out in the past, probably because we could not get a transit right through Bangladesh for those pipelines. But Myanmar is fairly forthcoming when future blocks are found in Myanmar, and India should take up this opportunity of exploiting these opportunities, and instead of focusing on West Asia for all our oil and gas supplies, we need to look in the neighborhood, and Myanmar is a very viable option.
There was a proposal also a few years ago for cooperation in the civil nuclear energy sector between India and Myanmar. So what is the current status of that proposal?
Myanmar has shown interest in civil nuclear cooperation. In fact, some of their scientists have already been training in our nuclear establishment for this purpose. And I think with the kind of close understanding which is developing between India and Myanmar, this will get a further boost.
In the trade sector, sir, how do you see the relationship going forward? There has been proposal of opening some border transit points for access of markets. So is it viable, and how can we just move forward in boosting trade and investment between India and Myanmar?
We have most of our trade is maritime, and the need for developing border trade, land-based trade, is important primarily because we have 4 northeastern states bordering Myanmar, and these states need their essential supplies, and they usually get them from the mainland, and it increases the prices of essential products. If they can be accessed from neighboring Myanmar, it would considerably reduce the prices, particularly with regard to energy supplies, with regard to agricultural products, and the like, which can be accessed from neighboring Myanmar state.
Dr. Singh, overall, to wrap up, how do you see India-Myanmar bilateral ties moving forward in the next 2 years?
I think it is very well established that the Act East policy, which was begun in 2014, is moving forward, and with ASEAN also keen on developing these ties, Myanmar and India will be improving their ties as time goes, and the visit of the President to New Delhi is indicative of that.
Dr. Singh, thank you so very much for your well thought out explanation of India's bilateral relationship with a very crucial and strategic neighbor, Myanmar. Thank you.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on India-Myanmar bilateral relations. The participants were Uday Bhanu Singh, expert on Myanmar issues, and Manas Pratim Bhuyan, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website newsonair.com. You can also follow us on the News on AIR app for updates. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.